Great. So we were having quite an interesting discussion on our table about, I think, and it was about the sort of opportunities, but the need for having mature products ready for market, because otherwise there's too much danger of pushback and these systems not being adopted because of failure. I'm wondering if anybody else had those sorts of similar discussions.
Right. On our table, we were talking about why does it take so long for robotic products to come to market. And I think I was hypothesizing that when you have a new product, a new technology, it's really just bringing two existing technologies together, maybe to make a slightly new application. Each new product isn't a massive revolution. Even something like the iPad is using technologies that have been around for 10 or 20 years and just slowly bringing them together bit by bit. With robotics, you've got maybe 3 or 4 or 5 new technologies you have to bring together. So we're going to see them slowly come together a little bit at a time, pairs perhaps, and eventually work our way up the tree of complexity until you've got the whole system working together in a robot. So that's why it's taking a long time.
Actually, would you really need mature products? There's quite a lot of technology that just found a way in our daily lives that wasn't mature. So the home computer, goodness, that wasn't mature at all. Nobody knew what to do with it. You bought it on the premise that you could kind of order your records on it, or that mum could keep her recipes. That's really not what we did with it. It just had how much, I don't know, the teenage son to get over. And so I actually think there's quite a lot of technologies that were certainly not mature and are not used in the way that we use them now that are successes. I think the same can happen with robots. If you think about vacuum cleaning robots, the first vacuum cleaning robots that were sold were so unreliable. iRobot had a huge problem. They didn't even consider any returns. And in the first few months of selling robots, they had tens of thousands of robots being returned to their offices. They didn't know where to put them. They were stacking them under their tables. And still, it is a success. So what you need is early adopters who are forgiving. And I don't think you need mature products. Of course it helps. Of course, if you have a reliable, robust product, it's going to be taken up if there's a market for it. But it's not necessary.
It shouldn't break. I mean, iRobot did it the hard way. I'm computer. So, if you look at the abstract, it did what it said on the tin. I mean, it didn't break down all the time. My worry about some robotic stuff, we've got to be careful. We don't make something that's really expensive. Okay, let me give you an example. Imagine you had something, so people always say, when are robots going to do dishes? Right? Let's take that example. Imagine I had a machine that could succeed in 999 out of 1,000 interactions with objects. When I mean an interaction, some sort of grasp. So every time it picks something, there was a grasp. That's an interaction. Did that 990 times out of 1,000. In a couple of weeks, all of your crockery would have smashed. It's all gone. Okay? But 999, that sounds like a really good deal. That's a great piece of engineering. That's a worry, is that we start to say, these are the things that the first robots will do. And actually, at that kind of 3 sigma performance, it's still not good enough. So we need to find applications where if the autonomy or the robotics fails, the fallback position is still able to function. And I think that's an important start. That's certainly how, for me, that's an important thing. So the driverless car actually always got a driver. You just may not have to drive all the time in all the places. And as the tech gets better, you'll have to drive in less of the places, less of the time.
Can I just add in terms of kind of avoiding pushback and things for our applications in the care home? So we're working with the staff there, and we've got this. What we want to do is build up over 4 years from a reliable navigating robot that literally just drives around to something that can do something useful in the care home in 4 years. So we kind of staged our application so we can start with a fallback position and move up. But the care staff, we don't want that. What the people in this building will be like, well, why is there a robot? What's it doing for me? It's useless. I don't care. It's just getting in the way. So they were pushing us from day one to make the robot do something, even if it's trivial. So us scientists are like, well, we don't want a robot to do this. Like, can it play a game? Can it play music? And we're like, well, yeah, cool. Like, can you do that then? I'm like, oh, all right. And just kind of listening to the end users saying they want these things. And so now they're saying, well, the people in the home are happy to have the robot around if they can press press a few buttons and engage with it, just in a very limited way. And it was just something we didn't think about. We just thought, hey, it's a cool robot that's going to drive around, and they just want, just working with the end users closely in the applications made a difference.
Shall we take some questions? I can see you.
Well, I just wanted to comment really on that, because I remember possibly 5 or 6 years ago, tug robots in US hospitals. Has anyone heard of the tug? And so this was a mobile robot that could navigate its environment. And predominantly they were used for delivering bedpans and blankets to wards, but some of them were set out with RFID sensors, so they could actually do asset tracking around the hospital. So they literally just roamed around the hospital and updated the hospital asset register. I mean, the classic thing was that nurses would need a spot a vital piece of equipment, defibrillator or something like that, and then stick it in the back room so they knew where it was when they needed it, but then the hospital would want to do maintenance on it and they wouldn't be able to find it. But what I thought was most interesting about that whole scenario is that if a tug broke down or got confused in navigation, it actually reached back to engineering wirelessly, and an engineer could drive it to the workshop. And that meant that nobody ever saw a broken down tug, or very unlikely, because a human behind it drove it back. So, there was just an interesting story in the use of humans and robots.
Also, I think that also there was a lot of drugs that was going missing between the pharmacy and the bedside, and so a lot of these were used with a safe on it that could only be released at the patient's bed that needed it, because there's an awful lot of drugs going missing.
Just to add to the driving impact, there's a lot of work on web robotics now, web interfaces. So we're working on our robots like emailing us, tweeting us, saying help, I'm stuck, and then you can just use a JavaScript app to navigate the robot back. So it's good.
There is an example of that in the agricultural sector, and the big combines now, they've got up to 17 CPUs on them, and it's all drive-by or X-by-wire, but they're all internet connected, and there's a big AI system in Germany, and all the data is then sent back, and the system that we've now got is that the operator in Germany has got the mobile phone number of the combine driver, and will then phone them up and tell them to tighten belt number 3 because it's coming a bit loose, and if you don't tighten it, it'll break down in 3 hours' time. So that actually is commercially available at the moment.
Are there any questions?
Cool. One of the themes of today is the willingness of the public to actually adopt this technology, which is the first. And I just wonder, we've got a nice range of different areas that we're working on. Which is going to be the trouble? Is it going to be autonomous vehicles that breaks down the barriers that people sort of see that normal people adopt? Is it going to be health, aging population, or education?
Well, to be honest, I think there isn't a barrier for my sector, and that the farmers, if we come up with the right technology, the farmers are there ready to utilise it. I don't actually see a barrier there. I think it is a technological barrier, which is most unusual. Normally, technology is so far ahead that there are other barriers, but I don't think there's any social barrier. This comes back to what we were saying before about maturity. Put a half-baked product on, get a bad reputation and returns and so on and so forth. To me, I mean, like most of us, we're interested. We've got smartphones and Apple and so on. It's a very good technology. They managed to mature it and bring it into the marketplace. Okay, we've got different versions of it, but I think from the agricultural robotic point of view, we've got to follow that example. We have to find a way of maturing it so that it is reliable, it does something useful, and because the farmers that buy this are not going to be interested in robotics, they're interested in business and making money out of this, and so it's just got to work. So we have to find ways of developing this before releasing them too early on the marketplace, in my view.
I think what Paul said in the previous QA was actually spot on, which is it's agriculture, it's mining, it's field robotics, port monitoring, it's big business, large scale that's going to innovate and drive the application of autonomous technology in sensing. And then you will see kind of more of a drip feed into places. Warehouses is going to be a great example. But we'll become comfortable with autonomous systems doing work in those kind of sectors. It's not going to be homes, it's not going to be care homes or assisted living, because I think that the markets just don't make sense there right now. So I think on these larger scales where there's mature technology, it will happen there, and we'll become more comfortable with autonomous vehicles doing things in these environments, so that when the technology is more mature and someone says, hey, well, there's an autonomous vehicle that can work in your office, We'll be like, okay, I've seen it work well at the warehouse, so I'm going to be happy with it here.
I think a lot of the warehouses are much more structured environment, so it's going to be easier for robots to move into progressively less and less structured environments. So I think you're absolutely right.
Any other questions?
I'm slightly more scared of a partial autonomous car than a full autonomous car, because if I can go to sleep for 20 minutes or 40 minutes, and then it says to me, I can drive the motorway there, that's fine. When I get into the busy centre, you need to take over. Suddenly, I've got to then snap to attention and drive, and I might not be keyed in. I might be ready, and potentially there might be more accidents as well.
I guess you'd hope. I guess you'd hope that the car would sort of slow down and stop or park or something if it realised you weren't competent to take over that point. Maybe give you a bit of a heads up, give you a 5-second warning that you're going to take over rather than go, "Hey, you're about to crash." Good luck.
You're not going to be able to be asleep in your car as a sole for a very, 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 very long time. You just won't get insurance. The car will just say you're not insured, you're asleep. You're not in control of this vehicle. I think we need to say that's the one. It's hands-free driving. How about that? Okay, it's not that you abdicate all responsibility because there's an awesome text file that's running this. That's not what's going to happen. You're going to just not have to be so intent on what's going on and so fatigued all the time. So the car knows when you're coming to an area where you need to drive again. So you'll be warned. And if you don't take over, the car will just stop. And that's our safety case. If there's a critical error, it expects you to take over. If you don't, it stops. Okay? And the insurance will be such that you won't be able to press that button again because you're not actually behaving in the right way for this car. And over time, that will get better and better and better. And maybe, many years down the line.
How many years?
Don't know. You don't need to be even facing forward. But it's certainly not in the business plan that we have that you abdicate all responsibility. And it's for the reason that you say. Because how do you bring a human back into the loop suddenly if they're just not even looking at the windscreen? God knows what they're doing.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of issues here. So I was reading this week, and they talked about this California regulation. One of their questions was, what if blind person is driving?
I think it's a non-problem to find people who can't drive cars at the moment. So you don't change the regulation. You say it's like a normal car. And we're going to say, like you can buy a car that's got air conditioning, you buy a car that drives you some of the time in some of the places, but not because you demand it. It's a different thing. I think it's really important that we socialise that idea. This is a technology that's going to blend over time. It's not going to be a step change for these issues.
I think one of the things we need to be able to consider, although we're talking about robots, it is only part of the system where we're taking people out. There are still people in charge of these things. So although in the agricultural sector we can foresee a tractor or small tractors not having a person hanging onto a steering wheel, but you have to still consider that it is a tool like any other tool, and there must be a responsible person in charge of that tool. They're not actually hanging onto the steering wheel anymore. They might be in here having a cup of coffee or scouting the fields or looking at the weather or making other management decisions, but it's still a person is responsible for that machine. And I think that's because in fact for many years I was trying to get people out of the system. Then I had the breakthrough moment. Of course, it's stupid. You can't take people out of this system. They've always got to be part of the system. They're just doing something slightly different.
So it sounds as though we've very much got a problem of setting the correct expectation levels, right? And I think that's a good place to maybe finish at the moment. It's a challenge for us all, right? It's a challenge for researchers, for industrialists, and for the press to actually realise what these technologies are capable of and what the roadmap really looks like, and not set unrealistic expectations. It certainly happens in many other technologies, and it can be the ruin. But we'll wrap it up there. I think I just would like to thank our speakers. So Simon, Paul, Tony, Nick, and Hugo. Thank you very much for talking to us today and being willing to take questions. Graham, thank you very much as well for being involved. And of course, Nikita, thank you. And thank you to Rework for helping to organise this. We're going to break now and have lunch. Yeah? So please stay around, have lunch with us, and take this opportunity again to talk informally to our speakers and to network. Thanks very much.